Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mike Norvell, Florida State, starting to get things going on the recruiting trail. Four-star defensive lineman Tico Crittendon committing to Florida State is, in my opinion, by far the best commitment that Florida State has landed in the 2026 cycle. I don't say this very often. This kid, I think, has some real upside that he's bringing to Florida State. But at the same time, I look at him and say the floor seems to be relatively high as well. When you have the ability to bring in guys that they have high floors, like they're a guy that it's hard to see Tico not being a multi-year contributor for Florida State, but at the same time gives you that potential top 50 NFL draft pick upside. Those are the ones you really like. And I think Tico brings that to you. I think Florida State at times they've bet on some upside, but they've bet on some upside with guys that have really high ceilings, but really low floors as well. I think Tico has that high ceiling, but I also think he has a relatively high floor. Like, this kid's going to be a good football player for Florida State over the next couple of years. And then the other thing that we've consistently talked about with this new coaching staff, fit. Hey, we want good football players, but we want guys that fit what we want to do. And you look at Tico and say, really versatile kid. And when we talk about Tony White defensive lines, you need versatility. I look at Tico and say, I think he can play the nose. I think he can play the three tech, quite frankly. I think he's athletic enough to maybe even play a little 4-eye. This is a guy you can move all along the defensive line in this Tony White defense. Good football player, good fit, offers you some upside, but also a guy you feel really good about being a contributor early for Florida State. It's what you're looking for. And here's the last thing before we get nitty gritty into Tico. A recruiting battle, another example of a recruiting battle that Mike Norvell and Florida State need to win more often. And you talk about winning ACC championships, you talk about competing in the college football playoffs, the expectations that we should have around this Florida State football program. You got to go beat Georgia out on the recruiting trail. You got to go beat Tennessee out on the recruiting trail, especially when it comes to line of scrimmage players. It's exactly what Terrence Knight and Tony White, Mike Norvell got done here. Like this kid a lot. Really excited to get into it. Before we do, and as always, the Florida State fans, appreciate you guys. And look, y'all know it's been a roller coaster. And a lot of the Florida State fans, y'all been rocking with the boys for a very long time at this point. It sounds like this program maybe getting some momentum going on the recruiting trail. You know, we've been breaking down some commitments over the last couple of days, and I think Florida State might be trending for a few more. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I'll consistently say this. If Mike Norvell is going to make it work in Tallahassee, we got to be talking more about these kind of commitments for Florida State over the next couple of months. It starts in the summer months, winning these kind of recruiting battles. The results, they're going to come, but it starts here. It starts with the Jimmies and Joes at the high school ranks. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's talk about Tico now. Again, the thing you love most, really good football player, really good fit in the Tony White defense. What are his strengths? I think number one, this kid he's 6'4", 300 pounds. He looks to have adequate length to maybe even plus length. But he's a really, really good athlete. He's good out of his stance. He's got a very, very good first step. We're used to talking about these kind of football players at the high school ranks just winning with overwhelming size and power. I think Tico has that size and power, but I also see a very intriguing athlete. And when you combine these interior defensive linemen that have the horsepower to make it happen, they have the length to make it happen, and they have the athleticism to make it happen, all of a sudden you're giving a lot of problems to these interior offensive linemen. I look at Tico and say he can be a guy that does that dirty work that's so important in the Tony White defense. You know, we talk about all the time that 3-3-5 look. You need your defensive lineman to eat up some double teams so your linebackers can come downhill free. He can do that, I think. At the same time, I think he can be a difference maker for you. I think he can be a penetrator. I think he can be a guy that pushes on 10 TFLs in a season because of that first step, because of that twitch, because of his ability to get behind the line of scrimmage. Getting a guy that can do the dirty work, a guy that can give you some upside in terms of creating negative plays, we're checking a lot of boxes. And again, plus the versatility, which I really want to highlight. We're going to turn on the film in just a second. You're going to see him play out on the edge. You're going to see him play the three tech. You're going to see him play nose. And he can do it all. And I think you'll be able to do it all at Florida State as well. Weaknesses or things you want to get cleaned up, probably technically. I think he relies on just being a really big, fast athlete. And that's what you want. We'll teach you how to be a good football player, but give us the guys that are good athletes. Probably got to clean up the stance a little bit too. Plays a little bit high at times. I don't see any glaring problem. I don't see any glaring limitations to this kid's game. From a physical standpoint, there should be no reason he can't be a very good football player for Florida State over the next couple of years. Get into the film a little bit. And again, there's going to be a bunch of things that jump out to you. I think the number one thing is how well he gets out of his stance and how explosive and twitchy he seems to be. Now, we maybe got to fix the stance a little bit high in the stance, but you start getting into it, that's an explosive first step. And then he's devastatingly powerful. I mean, we're putting guys, we're just with the raw horsepower we have, we are getting in there and we're wrecking games. He looks the part. I think he plays the part. I think he looks to have some really good length as well. You continue to work through it and say, there's a lot that intrigues me about his game. Again, first step, change the direction, be able to get behind the line of scrimmage and go make plays. I think he's a really good athlete for how big this kid is. What about the hands? Just benching number 70 out and then just ragdolling him, like putting him in the dirt. This is just horsepower, man. And that's what you want to see. And quite frankly, he does this a lot. I think the next play is going to do the same exact thing where we're going to get our hands on poor number 70 was just getting the work this game, put him right in the dirt again, and then just go be dog in a bone, play with the high motor, which not a lot of these big boys do at the high school ranks. Now we're playing a little bit more out on the edge. Again, a guy that can win from multiple different spots, a little bit of a spin move, and we probably got to clean up some of it. But again, I think that is, you ain't going to see many 300-pound bodies move the way Big Tico does. Really, really light on his feet, has the ability to win not only with power, but with athleticism. Again, playing out there on the edge, running the line of scrimmage. I think he's a guy that can be a presence moving laterally along the line of scrimmage. I think this kid checks a lot of boxes. And you look at Florida State, and I'll say this. I'm a fan of the defensive line class that Florida State has brought in. James Carrington, we talked about him a couple of days ago. This guy used to be a top 20 national dude, has kind of fallen in the rankings a little bit, bounced around high schools. To me, another really good fit in terms of what Florida State wants to do. Now, he ain't going to give you nose tackle stuff, but he's going to be a three tech and he's going to be an edge guy. 6'2", 260. This kid carries that weight exceptionally well. I not sure exactly what the upside looks like, although he does have some nice length. He's been a guy that physically has kind of looked the same from his freshman year to his going into his senior year. I think he can play, and I think he's going to be a contributor for Florida State. So you have two guys that you feel good about, and then you go down to Whitley Cadeau and say, all right, developmental guy. Probably not a guy that's seen the field much year one, year two, but does have some nice upside. We're operating under the assumption that Terrence Knighton's a damn good defensive line coach. In fact, the Florida State fans, y'all were giving me some heat for not putting him in my top 10 defensive line coaches in the country. And I think that heat might be fair. But he's a guy that, all right, we got two guys we feel good about coming in relatively early and playing. All right, we'll go bet on upside with Whitley Cadeau and see what he can be going into year 3 and year 4. I think at times for Florida State, the classes were too heavily with guys like Whitley Cadeau and just not enough proven dudes that can come in and play early. A little bit more balance in 2026. Again, the big key here, Florida State continuing to win out for some of their top targets on their board. We'll see if Mike Norvell can do it. If Mike Norvell is going to make it work at Tallahassee, I think he needs to continue to stack these kind of wins on the recruiting trail. We'll get out of here on that. Big fan of Tico. I feel as good about Tico as I felt about Kevin Wynn. We'll see how both of those players work out at Florida State, but I like this kid a lot. I think he can come in and be a difference maker for Florida State. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.